Hello. 이거 고르세요. Good morning, everybody. Before I proceed, I would like to make a humble request to everybody. If you could able to kindly switch your mobile phone over the silent mode to avoid any interruption, please. Thank you very much, and please allow me to introduce myself. And I'm Tenzin Dhamma, Program Coordinator of Tibet House, New Delhi. And on behalf of Tibet House Culture Center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, would like to welcome and extend our warm welcome to our chief guest, Venerable Professor Geshe Samdila, Vice Chancellor, Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, Varanasi. Our guest of honor, Professor Sumit Kumar Mishra, Principal Scientist, National Physical Laboratory, New Delhi, and our keynote speaker, Professor Sisi Roy, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore, and our esteemed speakers and the vibrant participants who joined over here for the National Conference on Quantum Physics and Buddhist Philosophy on the Ontological Reality. Thank you very much. And now I would like to request our chief guest, Venerable Professor Geshe Samdila, our guest of honor, Professor Sumit Mishra ji, and our keynote speaker, Professor Sisi Roy ji, to kindly light the lamp of wisdom and request to their respective seats on the dais, please. intersecting with Buddhist philosophy, psychology, with the contemplative understanding on Buddhist philosophy as well. And therefore, Tibet House organized the series of conferences and dialogues annually. Before I proceed, I would like to give a brief introduction about Tibet House and its activities. Tibet House. Tibet House, New Delhi, was established in 1965 by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet for the purpose of preserving the cultural heritage of Tibet at the time when it faced the extinction in its homeland, as well as for the providing a center for Tibetan culture and Buddhist studies. And His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama's recurring emphasis on developing a sense of universal harmony and compassion as its own effective antidote to global suffering, together with the needs for a meaningful exchange between different religious and cultural tradition, also had a profound effect on the purpose and its activities of Tibet House. Over the period of 5 decades since its inception, Tibet House has come to recognize as the significant institution for the dissemination of Tibetan culture and for the Buddhist studies. I'm sorry. Okay. Tibet House has a museum for a purpose, in His Holiness' word, to bring the heritage of the past in close contact. Tibet House, a publication unit which publishes around 10 to 15 books a year, and a program division which regularly organizes lectures, seminar, conferences, and film screenings and exhibitions. And since I've mentioned, Tibet House has a library and also had a very beautiful museum, as you can see it in the PowerPoint presentation. And now, Tibet House also offers 4 different courses on Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and Tibetan language. Firstly, the first batch of Nalanda Master's Course, which was launched on 9 December 2016 on the occasion of 51st anniversary of Tibet House, New Delhi, in the gracious presence of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, along with Shri Kiran Rijuji, the former Union Minister of Home Affairs, and Shri Najib Jung, Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. And the first batch of Nalanda Master's Course is completed with 372 students from 44 different countries. Let's see. And now, second batch of Nalanda Master's Course on Buddhist philosophy has already started in July, in which around 900 participants were enrolled from 54 different countries. And secondly, Nalanda Master's Course, which was launched on 2018, and 3 batches have been successfully completed so far, and it is also a 14-month course. The course is designed specifically to accommodate people who are more seriously interested in Buddhist philosophy while being in the midst of their busy schedule, along with the engagement and other commitments. Till now, we have successfully completed with 3 batches, and the 4th batches of Nalanda Diploma Course Batch 4 is now being offered, and the registration will start in December of this year. And very recently, we had a 2-month Nalanda certificate course, which was being offered to the student who wished to acquire knowledge of various Buddhist subjects in order to lay a very good foundation of Nalanda Buddhist philosophy to find a very meaningful life as well. These are the pictures that we have just clicked in. And during the lockdown, we could not able to attend on a offline basis and also in a regular basis. So we organized these studies in this form. So these are the pictures. Okay. Lastly, Tibet House also offers Tibetan language course on a very regular basis. There are 4 different levels of learning offered at a very nominal fee with a special concession for the students and monastics. Until date, 23 batches have been successfully completed, and for now, the 24th batch has been offered, and which is being both online and offline, and the actual course will start from 1st December this year. Thank you very much. And now I would like to request Mr. Choktanla to kindly address the gathering.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It feels great to see an overwhelming number of audience here today. So, on behalf of Culture Center, Tibet House Culture Center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and our director, Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdul, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to Venerable Geshe Ngawsam Tenla, Vice Chancellor. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, Sarnath, Varanasi. Guest of honor, Dr. Sumit Kumar Mishraji, Principal Scientist, CSIR National Physical Laboratory, New Delhi. Our keynote speaker, Professor Cecil Roy, National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. We're honored to have you here today, sir. I'm also pleased to be able to welcome all the distinguished speakers and participants, those of you who have been with us for long, as well as those of you who are new. Our director, Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdul, sent his apologies for not being able to attend the conference today. Although Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdul was very much looking forward to this conference, but owing to his busy schedule, with numerous travels within India and abroad lined up on his itinerary, he couldn't make it here today. Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdul expresses his deep gratitude and thanks to all the guests and participants. So coming back to today's conference, the topic, quantum physics and Buddhist philosophy, is by far one of the most discussed dialogues between Buddhism and science. While one may say that there are many similarities between quantum physics and Buddhist philosophy, there are times when these two traditions differ, and therefore further exploration is required. Now, given that quantum physics is in the phase of development, we very much look forward to uncovering the deeper layer in today's conference through conversation on ontological reality, and see where the two traditions overlap and where the two traditions diverge. So without further ado, I request our program coordinator to proceed with the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Choktanla. And now I would like to request Venerable Professor Geshe Ngawsam Tenla, Vice Chancellor of Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, to kindly share the few words at the conference. Before I request Geshe-la, I would like to share a brief introduction about him. He's currently the Vice Chancellor of Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, Sarnath, Varanasi, and he studied at the Central School for Tibetan in Chandigarh, Orissa, and thereafter at the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies at Sarnath. He possesses a rare combination of education on the modern lines as well as the Tibetan monastic system. He obtained the Geshe Haramba degree from Gandhi Sharse Monastery, equivalent to a PhD degree in the modern system. He is also very actively engaged in Hindi translation of Buddhist texts in Sanskrit and Tibetan. With a special interest in the philosophy of Nagarjuna, he published the definitive critical edition of the Ratnavali with its commentary as the result of his postgraduate research. And in 2009, he has been awarded Padma Shri, one of the country's highest civilian awards, by the President of India for his distinguished service in the field of education and literature. Please, round of applause to the Professor Geshang Asamdullah.
Sarvadrishtivarhanaya sadharmam adeshyat anukambam upadaya tam Gautamam namami. Respected Professor C.C. Raoji and Professor Sumit Mishraji and distinguished scientists and philosophers and friends. Today, we are at a very important juncture of the era where we stand. Physically, the world has shrunk into a village, and civilizationally, also because of that, we come across many of the civilizations meet, and this is one of the event of that meeting with the Western civilization and Eastern civilization, particularly Indian and Buddhist civilization and culture. As we can see, in India, the focus of exploration and advancement had been in India in ancient time, primarily on inner world, not external world. That is why we don't find lots of the developments and advancements in the physical world. Of course, we can see some after the arrival of foreign rulers in India. Otherwise, we can see the civilizational kind of impact, a civilizational kind of the culture which had been primarily focusing on inner development, and this is the hallmark of Indian civilization, we can say, in a way. And industrializations and advancement of the material world was not the part of the area where the great scholars of all the Indian philosophical schools and religious systems have made. Rather, if we look into the inner structure and system of Indian civilization, then we get the picture that in ancient India there was a very, very rich interaction amongst the Indian philosophical schools. Whereas you cannot see that kind of interaction in other civilizational kind of domains. In India, there was a very, very strong interaction amongst the philosophical schools. I used to say that in order to have an idea about this rich interaction, we don't have to ask any historian. We can look into the texts, treatises written by the scholars, masters of respective schools. This may be Vedanta, Mimamsa, Vaisheshika, Nayayika, Jaina, and Buddhism. You can see very clearly, vividly, how this interaction took place, and then they have contributed to each other and collectively moved further. This is the beauty of that ancient Indian civilization. And Nalanda, Vikramashila, Takshashila, these intellectual and learning centers have contributed a lot, and they took a lead in that, particularly in the field of But then on the other hand, we can see in the Western world this advancement in scientific world. This is also highly appreciable. We must appreciate that, the contributions made by the scientists. But the difference between the Indian civilizational and intellectual advancement, the objective of Indian advancement of the science, particularly the science of mind, and the Western, the science, the objectives, if we compare it, the objectives were very different. Whereas the Indian civilizational kind of advancement is concerned, Acharya Nagarjuna has said that, just in order to save time, I'm jumping, leaving many things in between. He has said in one of in his magnum opus, Mool Madhyamika Karika, karma kleshat mokshaha karma klesha vikalpataha te prapanchastu shunyatayam nirudhyate, which means karma kleshat moksha, the karma and afflictions when they are eliminated, the liberation can be achieved. And where from the karma klesha come? The karma kleshas come from vikalpataha, from mental fabrication. And these mental fabrications, these fabrications, these karma and klesha afflictions come from prapancha, from fabrication, and the fabrications diminish in shunyata. They shunyatayam nirudhyate. So the very purpose of exploration of the world, gain a knowledge and then produce something out of that, but to bring transformation within ourselves. Because the way we live, the moment we open our eyes, the moment we start to think, it is simply reflection to the external world that we perceive. So our perception needs to be right. And our perception needs to be to perceive the world as it is. That is the very objective of all the Indian philosophical schools. I'm just giving one example of Buddhism, because there are many differences in views, but the approach and the direction is same. So once we have a right perspective, then rest of the things are channelized properly. That is the idea. And also in other, Indian philosophical schools, darshan and drishti, many people think that these two are similar, but they are very different, If you study darshan and contemplate it, and then imbibe it or bring transformation, then your drishti will change. If you have a proper drishti, then you can behave properly according to your drishti. So this is a very important kind of agenda of the Indian philosophical, study, that we need to change our perception, how we look at things. That is why Buddhism is interested in, Buddhism and other schools are interested in understanding the nature of atom. It is not for the purpose of making atom bomb, but to explore that kind of the strong, refining notion that we have. To destroy that. That is why in Buddhism you can find the hallmark of Buddhist study and Buddhist philosophy is deconstruction of reification. Deconstruction of our refined nature, the way we look at the world as a reified entity. Right from very beginning, this has been the exercise. There are schools in Buddhism, because all the schools have different levels of understanding of reality, the nature of reality. Some schools subscribe to the idea that the atoms are the ultimate nature and they are indivisible. They are the ultimate unit of the entity, the material form, so far as the atom is concerned. But the entities composed and produced by these atoms, they are designated, they are imputed. They don't go beyond that. So that is why in Buddhism there is a very strong notion of nairatmya, selflessness. The Shravaka schools, the two lower schools, subscribe to the selflessness of person. But the upper schools, the Mahayana schools, Vijnanavada and Madhyamika, they oppose to the substantial final unit of the material world. They attacked, they refuted their ideas and went to that state, that atom subatomic level, and it went to that level where atoms get dissolved. You won't find anything. Nothing can be found at that level. So what remains? Nothing remains. Nothing remains in the sense of a substantial kind of nature of that entity. That is not there. That is the shunyata. Shunyata of substantiality is, many people feel that, the shunyata of ghat, shunyata of pat, that is not acceptable. The Madhyamika is not proposing the empty, nature. So when it dissolves, then what remains? But it does not, negate the very existence of ghata. For example, right? The ghat is there, which is conventionally applicable, observable, usable. But from the ultimate reality perspective, that does not exist. And that is because we normally reify these entities. Even the ghat is reified. And then when we go deeper into the level of atom, just as the Sautantrikas do that, then at that level. So Authenticas can deconstruct the reification at the level of Ghat itself, but not at the level of atom. So Madhyamika's atomic level, and then deconstructs the reification of that level, that entity, that subtle entity. But the conventional, that is why in Buddhism, one of my very respect, the physicist, renowned physicist, and he had been a chairperson of Mind and Life also. We used to go to each other's classrooms to teach. In physics, I used to go there, and in Buddhist philosophy, when I was teaching at Amherst, then he used to come and teach. We, collectively, jointly take classes on philosophy and science. He used to say that in Buddhism you have the system of two truths. That is very helpful. Whereas in science and physics we don't have that. When it goes to that level and dissolves, that sometimes becomes difficult to accept the existence of the entity, either Ghat or particle itself. So the very idea, as I have been saying that, the very idea of, perhaps my watch has stopped here. So what is the time, please? Okay, I must, because it stopped at... okay, so... So the very purpose, as I mentioned, is to bring transformation within ourselves. And as Acharya Nagarjuna says that all the kleshas, the karmas, whatever suffering we have is out of kleshas, the afflictive mind. And the afflictive mind is responsible for the behaviors, the actions that we enact, perform. So in order to address it from the very fundamental level, we need to, address it, to change the very perception, and then, subsequently change our behavior, and then come out of the suffering. That is the whole agenda and the objective of Indian civilizational kind of the exercise. So with these things, words, I would like thank you for appreciate Tibet House, the endeavor to conduct these kind of conferences and workshops quite often. And also I appreciate with the very limited resource people, they run very comprehensive and major courses like a master's course in Nalanda tradition and things like that. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kishan Samtila. And now I would like to request Dr. Sumit Kumar Mishra ji to kindly address the gathering. Before I pass the mic over to him, I would like to share the brief introduction about him as well. Dr. Mishra did his MSc in physics from Lucknow University, followed by MTech in atmospheric physics from the Pune University, and in Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune, and PhD in civil engineering specialization in environmental engineer at IIT Kanpur. Dr. Mishra is the principal scientist in National Physical Laboratory in Delhi, and he has worked as a visiting researcher in the Department of Network and Computer Engineering, Tokai University in Japan in 2006. He availed the prestigious fellowship in 2012 to 13 and worked with professional...
For the respected Professor G.N. Samtanji, Vice Chancellor, Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, Sarnath, Varanasi. Professor Shishir Roy from National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. Mr. Tenjin Chogdanji, Secretary, Tibet House, New Delhi. And dear audience, I feel honored to express my views here, although I am not the expert of the topic which is going to be brainstormed today, but I will try to touch on the scientific and philosophical facets related to this. So I start with a quote by physicist Heisenberg, which is a German physicist. He says, After the conversations about Indian philosophy, some of the ideas of quantum physics that had seemed so crazy suddenly made much more sense. So, the science of yoga and meditation does not fit into the Western paradigm of reductionist science. However, the recent quantum physics of holism can and does fit into it eminently. In fact, quantum physics has come very close to the ancient Indian philosophy. German physicist H.P. Durr, who enunciated the duality principle in quantum physics, feels that he is just playing the second fiddle to the ancient Indian sages who have recognized a duality in form of Advaita. Titled as Myths of Science, as many scientists do not seek to find the relationship between the individual components of a system, which is very imperative. Until unless we understand the individual compartment, we cannot come up with the whole physics of the system. So instead, they dissect things into smaller and smaller units. This way of perceiving the world has been called Newtonianism or reductionism. All things exist in relationship to other things. Many scientists attempt to disconnect from these relationships and prefer to observe the world from a mechanistic viewpoint. The understanding of only compartment does not make the researcher understand the interconnections of various components in the whole system. Me as a climate scientist, if I look at atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, all different facets, I cannot come up to a real assessment of the climate change assessment until unless we integrate in different models, like atmospheric model, the ocean model. Until unless these models are coupled, nothing can be told precisely in terms of climate change assessment. So the Indian philosophy is to look in a holistic way. The consciousness is the energy that flows as waves and is not seen or felt as particles, and the same has not been comprehended by many scientists even today. The father of quantum physics, Max Planck, however, had realized that consciousness is fundamental. Even matter gets derived from the consciousness. We all know that the universe comprises of materials and non-materials, that is, living beings. Their energies are in various quantized energy levels, sub-levels in the energy clusters. For being life, for the living being, the 2 zero states, that's the birth and the death cycle, and spirit blueprints are observed from which the energy is distinguished to be bright and dark energies. Principally, the bright and dark energies are the entangled and orthogonal quantities. The bright and dark spirit signals can be controlled by keeping the bright spirit signal always larger than that of the dark energy. And when the dark energy enhances, that gives rise to suffering. The spirit is formed by the energy signal oscillating with time, which is called soul, where the stopping spirit with time is called mind. The spirit can be kept at rest by consideration of being dead, which is method of 4 mindfulness foundation. That is mindfulness of body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of mind, and mindfulness of Dhamma. The 4 noble truths comprise the essence of Lord Buddha's teaching, that is the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path. That the way to eradicate human anguish or suffering is to remove the attachment, the craving of our mind towards this physical system, from various objects or concepts to which we are attached. From the Buddha history in the Tipitaka book, there were 3 practical ways the Lord Buddha has gone through before reaching the enlightenment. The first one is spirit oscillation time control by meditation. Second, bright and dark spirit signal conversions by dietary. And the third is spirit energy control by 4 mindfulness foundation, which I discussed earlier. The brain performance could be increased and can be reached to the state of unlimited brain performance, which is expressed as the ratio of S by P. S is the pure mind signal and P is our passion signal. If, as Sir has already briefed, we detach ourselves from the physical charms, and when P tends to 0, then it gives rise to 1 upon 0, that gives rise to infinite. The brain performance tends to infinity. That gives the a kind of enlightenment. Now, I don't want to take further more time on these things because I'm not really the expert and it would not be a justice to look in. So, and I don't want to be working as a barrier between you and Professor Shishir Roy, who is well-known quantum physics expert. And I was fortunate to hear him many times. So, with this, I'm closing my words with a quote on Rigveda. Na o bhadraha kritvo yantu vishyataha. Let noble thoughts come to us from all and every direction in the universe, because here we are assembling to discuss various facets of the regimes lying in the science and spirituality. So I think there are various sessions which are planned today in different sessions. I had gone through the topic, so it's really interesting, and I wish that it should go, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Sumit Kumar Mishra ji. And now I would like to request Professor Shishir Roy ji to kindly address the gathering. And also, before I proceed, I request Professor Shishir, I would like to share a brief introduction of him as well. Professor Shishir Roy, a theoretical physicist, is currently working as a visiting professor and a senior Homi Bhabha fellowship at National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. He worked as a professor in physics and applied mathematics in UNIT, Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. Professor Shishir Roy published more than 250 papers in international journal and published 16 research monographs and edited volumes of Kluwer, Academic, Springer, World Scientific, etc. And his main field of interest include foundation of quantum theory, cosmology, brain function, modeling, and consciousness. His recent book include Demystifying the Akasha, Quantum Vacuum, and Consciousness in New York, 2011. And he has published various books and various papers. And without taking much time, I would like to minimize it and proceed to you. So.
PowerPoint. Keynote.
Have you already put the PPT in
Yeah,
it?
Tibet House.
Where is your pen drive?
No, it has been put here. Tibet House.
This one?
Keynote. Yeah. Not coming?
Yeah. So.
Okay. Respective Professor Shamtanji, and who is the chief guest, Professor Sumit Kumar Mishra from NPL, is the guest of honor, and my learned colleagues, scientists and philosophers. We have arranged many conferences, and even His Holiness also arranged, with the collaboration of Mind and Life Institute, many dialogues among the scientists and philosophers. But the one particular things which haunted me, many of my students and other serious researchers, especially in physics, they had a long query, like, why do we discuss philosophy? Because what kind of benefit we can get it so that we can spend time. This is the questions coming up, and unless we can give some insights or some thoughts in this issue, it's very difficult to get the serious young minds who are deeply involved in scientific research. Even not in India, if you look at the world perspective, then this kind of debate has arisen already. So the question is, does science need philosophy at all? one of the greatest physicists in 20th century, Stephen Weinberg. Of course, he passed away maybe 6 months or 1 year before. He's from USA. He won Nobel Prize. So he made a remarkable statement. He argues that philosophy is more damaging than helpful for physics. Although it might provide some good ideas at times, it is often a straitjacket that physicists have to free themselves from. He is very, very influential physicist, not only in USA, but all over the world. More radically, another great physicist, Stephen Hawking, who is also no more with us, Stephen Hawking wrote, "Philosophy is dead because the big questions that used to be discussed by the philosophers are now in the hands of physicists." Well, this is very, very big statements, and both of them are very influential. Now, Stephen Weinberg, who wrote this book, Dreams of Final Theory, I mean, they tried to understand a theory which is called theory of everything, so that it can explain all entities in this physical universe. It was Einstein's dream, and he told that physicists whether they can really construct such kind of theory. Now, the main issue is regarding methodology of science and methodology of the philosophy in various schools of even Indian philosophy. So if you try to understand what is the methodology of science and what is the methodology of philosophy itself. So methodology of science in a single sentence called empiricisms. And a currently common description of what scientists do, the one we learn today at school or college, is collecting data from observation, experiments, and measurements, and making sense of them in the form of theories. So the relationship between data and theory is very, very complex. And far from being uncontroversial, since it's not at all obvious how we can make a theory out of the data. It's very complex, and nobody knows the clear path that starting from a data, how can you build up a theory. But now, if you look at the different schools, like we observe certain entities or certain things happening in the world, and then in philosophy what they say, that we use our sensory organs, and through experience we get something. But in science in general, this is not true. What we use instruments, sensory organs, and then we try to interpret. So we don't know what is the role of the instruments, or which kind of philosophical school they talked about instruments, what is their characteristics, and what is their usefulness. So there is methodological differences between science and philosophy. One very interesting work was published recently by theoretical physicist, his name is Carlo Rovelli. He made another different statements. He told that those who deny the utility of philosophy are doing philosophy in writing things like philosophy is useless to physics or philosophy is dead. They are not doing physics. So what they are doing, they are reflecting on the best way to develop science. So the issue here is the methodology of science. A central concern in the philosophy of science is, of course, precisely to ask how science is done and how it could be done to be more effective. So good scientists do reflect on their own methodology, and it is quite appropriate that Weinberg and Hawking have done so too. Because time is very less for me, it's 10 minutes and it's very difficult to say. I can say there are two aspects of the issues. One is relevance of philosophy to science in the past, and now the questions of whether philosophy has become irrelevant in the present day science. Because in past, many of us, they give references to Heisenberg, not only Heisenberg, Eddington, Einstein, Max Planck, but now people like Stephen Weinberg or Hawking, they said now because of the advancements of technology, we have collected lots and lots of data. So we do not really to study more on philosophy, or we have to investigate what is there in philosophy. So there is a debate going on, but we have something in our mind which I can expose it here. Okay, what is that? Like, before going to that, what is the current debates going on, or which kind of topics in modern science, or especially modern physics, is going on? One of the issues is what is space itself? Desh, in philosophy called, Indian philosophy called Desh. What is time? Is Kal. What is the, then is the world deterministic? I mean, do you need to take observer into account to describe nature? Even when Professor Samtenji, he was referring Mulo Madhyamikarika in the Nagarjuna's, the great book. There is one chapter, maybe 17th chapter, where he discussed about Kalo, or time itself. So time is very much important issue in modern science. So, I mean, the issue regarding time is what is the ontology of time, what is the ontology of space, and ontology means kind of substratum which cannot be reduced further on, irreducible. So these are the issues nowadays are debated even in theoretical physics, not even in philosophical perspective, but there are some issues like in 21st century physics. For example, the scientists, they discovered that there exists a kind of very small scale called small scale of length called Planck scale, or small scale of time called Planck time. How scientists discovered this? Scientists uses the numerical value of Planck constant, which is one of the fundamental constant, speed of light, another fundamental constant, and gravitational constant. Out of these three fundamental constants, and using dimensional analysis, they found a small scale of length called Planck scale. What is the dimension? 10 to the power minus 33 centimeter. Well, I cannot visualize what is 10 to the power minus 33 centimeter, because every time is kilometer, meter, or centimeter, or millimeter like, but it is 10 to the power minus 33 centimeter. This is the smallest scale of length. What is the smallest scale of time? Called Planck time. What is that? 10 to the power minus 43 second. Well, this is another very, very small number, and we cannot visualize in our sensory perception. Why these are so important? Because if you look at the smallest scale of length, it means below that length there is no concept of space, no concept of time, or no concept of causation. So the issue is how in everyday life we have concept of space, we have concept of time, we have concept of causations. So issue is how from a substratum where there is no concept of space, no concept of time, no concept of causation. So how from a substratum without these things we are getting, or the concept like space, time and causation emerges. This is called ontological issues. And these ontological issues, this is, I mean, haunting the physicists, not from philosophical side, even from physics point of view. And people are proposing, I mean, it's not in science, even in philosophy. There is a concept called Gedanken experiments in German. In English it is called thought experiments. So what they do, they propose kind of experiments which which may not, I mean, they think that it may be done in the laboratory, but in the onset, they don't think that whether it is done, it can be done in lab or not. So they propose some kind of thought experiment, which are very, very important, even to understand these kind of issues. So these type of thought experiments are many, many in philosophy also. Philosophy, social science, not only physics. Like one very well-known issue is Plato's cave. I mean, a set of prisoners are facing the wall. I mean, they are putting in such a way that they can look into the wall itself. And because of the light, they will see the shadows on the wall. So for them, I mean, they are there for years after years. So for them, reality is like shadows. So this is Plato's prisoners. The issue is, what is reality? Similar thought experiments also people do in physics also. Like Schrödinger himself proposed a cat experiment called Schrödinger cat, or Wigner, Einstein's, many, many great scientists, or even Galileo. They initially put some thought experiment, and later scientists tried to understand through lab experiments. Similarly, in Buddhist philosophy, there is one very famous thought experiment called Payasi Sukta. I mean, the events of Payasi Sukta occur just after Buddha's parinirvana and the distribution of his relics. It is a debate between the prince Payasi and the Buddhist monk Kumara Kashyap. So, that prince, he used to say something which is against the core of Buddhist philosophy, and then the monk, Buddhist monk, he tried to refute it. Like at that time, Prince raised that you are saying that consciousness, quote unquote, I don't understand what is consciousness. Consciousness is there in a human body, and the body is placed in a closed jar. So he told, after the death of the persons, you just wait before death and after death, and you don't see any difference. So he refuted that consciousness exists in a body. This is kind of first kind of experiment. And if you look this kind of challenges by Prince Payasi, then you will immediately recognize he is just like a modern day scientist. But I don't know, maybe Professor Samtenji might tell whether that time they had a kind of notion of laboratory experiments. They used thought experiments, what we do here in science, but in science we do also lab experiments. Then comes doctrine of true truths, what Samtenji told, that conventional truth or ultimate truth, which is in Vedanta also we say Vyavaharik Satya and Paramarthik Satya. But in physics, he rightly said, we don't know. Yeah. We don't know how to categorize the conventional truth and ultimate truth. Unless we can categorize it, it will be very difficult to have a dialogue between the core philosophy of Nagarjuna, that ultimate truth and conventional truth, with the truth or layers of truth in physics like classical physics, classical reality, then quantum reality, etc. I don't have time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sisiroy ji. And now, before I conclude today's inaugural session, On behalf of Tibet House, New Delhi, would like to thank especially our chief guest, Venerable Professor Keshang Samtila, our guest of honor, Professor Sumit Kumar Mishra ji, and our keynote speaker, and to all the speakers for accepting the invitation in a very short period of time and gracing this occasion. Thank you very much. And now we're starting our first session in 5 minutes, so please be seated. And the first session is on quantum cognition and the concept of free will in Buddhism versus logic and excluded middle, and evolution of the principle of causality from antiquity to its relevance to quantum physics versus two truths with emphasis on emptiness as the foundation of all the existences. And my colleague, Mr. Lekmila, will be moderating first session. Thank you very much.